great harm from this at all. I really can't see it. If it came in separately, I don't think we'd even be having this discussion about it. And so I'm happy to support John if he needs a seconder on that. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to contribute to the discussion? Therefore, Councillor Niche, are you happy to propose approval?
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to propose that we approve this application.
Fantastic. And Councillor Dew, are you happy to second that? Thank you very much. Therefore, all of those that are in favour of approval, can you please raise your hand?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13.
And those that are against?
1, 2.
And any abstentions? No abstentions, therefore that has been approved. We are now moving on to item 3B, and there will be several people moving from the room.
Good evening. So this application relates to the Priory Centre, which is an existing community building which provides space for community use and private hire. The application is presented to DMC as the application has been submitted by HDC for development on land within HDC's ownership. So here we have an aerial image showing the Priory Centre, its relationship with the river and the town centre. There are a number of heritage assets in the vicinity of the site. We have the St Neots Conservation Area, 3 listed buildings shown in pink, the Maltings Priory House and the Priory, and we have 2 scheduled monuments, the Malting Kiln, which is part of the pink building at the top, and the St Neots Priory, which is the large area hatched in pink. So looking at the proposed ground floor plan, you'll see at the far end, the northern end of the building, the 2-storey extension that's proposed. So this is to replace the existing single-storey St Neots Town Council offices. The proposed extension would create a new hall space at ground floor level with access to the river terrace and a new office space for the Town Council above. There are also other various internal alterations to the ground floor. Looking at the proposed first floor plan, again, you can see the first floor, the St Neots Town Council replacement offices. The Great Hall is at the ground floor, but a mezzanine is proposed internally. As you'll see on the later plans, a dormer window is proposed onto Priory Lane, and that's indicated here on the floor plan. As you can see, this hatched area here as set out in section 7.35 of the report, this window would have internal fixed timber screening at first floor level to prevent overlooking and loss of privacy to Priory House, which is on the opposite side of Priory Lane. And also on the proposed first floor plan, you can see a series of small bookable rooms on a first floor extension facing Priory Lane. And then on the other side, the river, 2 small bookable rooms. The proposed roof plan. So here we can see the roof of the proposed 2-story extension. On top of the extension is proposed some plants. So that will be mainly air source heat pumps with an octagonal screen. And then moving on to the side elevation. So this is the north elevation, showing the 2-story flat roof extension with roof plant above. The roof plant screen will project approximately 1.9 meters above the parapet wall. As per paragraph 7.23 of the report, there's a requirement for the plant to be spaced out and well ventilated. So that's why it hasn't been contained within the building, and other options have also been explored, such as the river terrace and service yard. However, these options would both impact the community functioning of the building. The proposed plant screen serves to not only visually screen the air source heat pumps and other plant, but it also ensures that the plant, when operational, does not exceed the required noise thresholds for nearby commercial and residential properties. So now we've got the east elevation. So this is facing Priory Lane. Here you can see the proposed dormer window, which would bring light and ventilation to the Great Hall, as well as acting as a visual focal point on Priory Lane. The scale and design of the dormer has been revised during the course of the application to take on board comments from urban design and conservation. And we can also see on this elevation various proposed external alterations, including new doors and windows, blocking up of existing windows, and then that first floor flat roof extension just there. And then south elevation, showing the relationship with Priory House. The alterations to this elevation are limited to inserting new windows and an external ramp. We can see the side elevations of those flat roof extensions, the outline of the dormer just there. And then we've got the west elevation facing the river. So this shows the proposed 2-story extension in the context of the cone of the Malt House to the rear. I'll touch on this later in the presentation, but the proposed 2-story extension with plant screen, it's acknowledged that this would inevitably block some views of the malting kiln, which is a scheduled monument and a listed building. And that would be in certain views from the meadows across the river. A view study has been included in section 4 of the submitted heritage statement to demonstrate that some views, particularly the top of the cone, would still be visible in views from the east, above and to the side of the proposed extension. So this has been included in the presentation for illustrative purposes only. And the next, I've got a photo of existing, just so you can make that comparison. Slightly different viewpoint. The dormer window would be around here, and then first floor extension where those existing dormer windows are. And then we've got, another illustrative drawing of the river elevation. Just to note that this is purely illustrative. The colour of the brick on the Priory Centre looks slightly different to what you'll see from the site photos, and the proposed red brickwork and cladding to the extensions shown here, they're purely indicative, as officers have recommended conditions to secure the exact details of those materials. So the site photos, you can see the existing single storey, St Neots Town Council offices with the cone in the background. The front elevation on Priory Lane, so the first floor flat roof extension would go above these single storey projections. And then looking back down Priory Lane, you've got Priory House on the left. the existing single-storey extension to be demolished. And to the rear of the building, the other side of Priory Lane, you can see the malt house and the malting kiln. So in terms of the officer assessment set out in the report, it's been set out that in accordance with the MPPF, clear and convincing justification is required for any harm to heritage assets. So this has been included in the submitted design and access statement. And the justification has also been discussed within the officer report and summarise some of those key points on the slide for you here. I'll just run through a few of those for you. So the proposal looks to improve capacity in the Great Hall and the Guest Hall, as well as provide an additional hall space for meetings and events, additional smaller booking rooms. The proposal looks to create a viable community venue. It currently runs at a commercial loss, improve the fabric performance of the building, incorporating low carbon alternatives such as air source heat pumps and solar panels, retaining the St Neots Town Council offices within the town centre. So moving on to the impact to heritage assets, we've received the specialist advice from our conservation officer on the application, who's raised an objection. Officers do not disagree with this objection. The harm has been set out within the report. It's considered that there's less than substantial harm to the significance of 4 heritage assets, which has been summarised on this slide for you here. And the greatest level of harm is considered to be to the malting kiln as a scheduled monument. It should also be noted that we had comments from Historic England, who raised an objection on the initial round of consultation. However, we've received no updated comments on the recent reconsultation since a revised heritage statement and amended plans have been submitted. So the key areas just to pick up on this slide, the 2-storey side extension, the flat roof and the plant screen would harm the setting of the malt house, listed building and the malting kiln scheduled monument by reason of obscuring part of the cone of the kiln from views across the river. We've got the impact on the setting of Priory House, particularly from the Great Hall dormer and the first floor extensions on that Priory Lane elevation. And then the harm to the St Neots conservation area by virtue of the harm that's caused to those other heritage assets within it. So paragraph 208 of the MPPF requires us, where there is less than substantial harm, the decision maker needs to balance this against the public benefits of the scheme. So that's been carried out in the report. And I've included some of those points here. So the harm is considered less than substantial to those 4 heritage assets, as I've mentioned. And then we've got the benefits on here. So that's the enhanced and continued community use of the building. The refurbishment and extensions would provide additional bookable rooms of varying sizes for flexible use, incorporating low carbon energy solutions. And taken as a whole, it's considered that the social, environmental and economic benefits of the scheme taken together would outweigh the harm to heritage assets. The officer recommendation is therefore one of approval, subject to the conditions at the end of the report and contained on the slide. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll now hear from one of our speakers online, who is an objector, Douglas Bridge. You have 3 minutes.
Can you hear me okay? Hello? Can you hear me? Could you confirm? You can hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you, everybody. So I'm speaking today as the owner of Priory House, which is a Grade 2 listed family home that sits parallel to the Priory Centre. I'm going to keep this short and to the point, as my objection should be easy to understand and clear cut. So my understanding is that overlooking and loss of privacy are material planning considerations which legislation has determined should be taken into account when deciding on a planning application. My objection here relates to the dormer viewing window, which is E1 on the proposed east elevation drawing. This dormer window looks directly into our bathroom window and also overlooks our rear garden. I've raised my objection to this via the planning application process, and it should be noted that in the original planning application submitted, no reference was made to these privacy matters. This was unfortunately overlooked by the architects when I spoke to them. Now, there are photos and further detail in my objection letter, which I would encourage you to review if you have not already. But in summary, again, it should be made clear that the only view the dormer window provides is a view directly into my family bathroom and rear garden. Now, in the latest submission made, there have been a couple of sentences added within that submission stating that the dormer window privacy issue will be mitigated through window design and privacy screen joinery and controlled through condition. This, for me, does not address the significant privacy impact on our family bathroom and our rear garden, and I'm therefore here today to reiterate my objection to this proposal. I don't believe that a condition to be discharged is an acceptable route forward, nor that it addresses this material planning consideration related to overlooking and loss of privacy. And I'm therefore requesting that the plans are amended and resubmitted to resolve this matter. I would also note that my confidence is somewhat low in the architectural team employed here, as they also do not appear to have realised that a further 2 windows, which are approximately 1.5 metres by 2 metres, referenced as E1 in the proposed south elevation, also significantly overlook our neighbour's home and garden at the Priory, which is another Grade 2 listed residential building. So I appreciate everybody for taking the time to listen to me today and for considering the points that I've made. And I would urge the committee to reject this application until it is amended and resubmitted, addressing these material issues that I have raised. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions for our speaker? We don't have any questions, so thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much.
Next, we have our agent, and we've also got Sam Colbeck for any questions as well. Thank you, Tom, for joining us. You can just press the middle button when you're ready, and you've got 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. The Priory Centre is a well-known community space in St Neots, built in the 1980s on the former Days Brewery site. The centre is now in need of tender love and care. Elements are towards the end of their design life. Key building services have been non-functioning in this century. The building is not well placed for the climate emergency or the net zero challenge. The brief and business plan were developed through the assembled building development group, and the emerging design received overwhelming positive feedback through community engagement. The ambition is to turn around the centre's fortunes, currently operating at £300,000 annual loss. The community asks for a change in perception, a centre that makes the most of the fantastic river frontage, providing 3 destination venues right in the heart of St Neots. Overall, we are providing more efficient and better performing spaces for the community to use. The proposals are refurbishment led, improving the services and fabric. However, some external change supports a more sustainable future with significant public benefit in the long term. A focus is at the north end, replacing the existing St Neots Town Council offices with a two-storey building, providing a community space with offices above. The new hall ideal for Town Council meetings, with the office provision supporting modern methods of working. The roof has an acoustic plant enclosure for an air source heat pump that requires high levels of ventilation. This is a vital part of the building services renewal, which is otherwise filling the entire loft of the building. The air source heat pump provision, using electricity instead of gas, is a key part of the building's transition to a long-term net zero future. We acknowledge the heritage impact, especially to the nearby listed buildings and monument. A small amount of damage has been reported, especially in relation to the interruption of some views from the Oast House from Regatta Meadows. We have worked in detail with offices to reduce damage wherever possible, and we thank officers for their continued collaboration and through the proposed conditions to ensure that the centre, when reopened, is of a high quality overall. The centre is now closed with reduced community services relocated. To keep in step with funding deadlines, we are poised to commence enabling works to the building interior and ask for planning permission to allow the full public benefit anticipated through the funding secured to be actioned and delivered. Thank you.
Thank you. And would any members like to ask any questions for our speaker? Yeah, Councillor Kevin Gawson, please.
Thank you, Chair. We've heard from, I've got a couple of questions, if that's okay. I'll ask the first one. We've heard from Mr. Bridge about the overlooking and loss of privacy. What can you do to help or assist with that in this application?
Thank you for that question. I think that the number of conditions listed that are still outstanding, subject to ongoing discussion with officers, goes beyond the simple suggestion that something is good or bad, right or wrong, and talks about a process of ensuring that a good outcome happens. So the privacy issue was considered as soon as it was raised, and is a consideration that gains benefit from the owner's understanding of their property. I think the dormer window, the proposal is to screen the view so that no straight-on view of the property is possible and no view into the window is possible, and that the views are actually angled. It's about a source of light, but also the view is angled down Priory Lane towards the Market Square. And then the overlooking of the garden is considered from two views, and in both of those views, the screening that's built in permanently into the building will stop views of the garden. Although it should be noted that views of the garden are available from the first floor of the library at closer proximity, perhaps, than the windows that we've been talking about. So we're doing, we think, all we can to ensure that there is no loss of privacy and no loss of amenity to either the room or the garden.
If I may ask the second, there speaks of additional capacity at this venue because the highways have said about the possibility of parking being a concern. What is the additional capacity that is going to be accepted at this new, with all the increase of people using this facility?
I think the existing capacity and the future capacity can be considered in two ways. One, peak capacity, when, for example, the Great Hall is in maximum use, and another being the overall capacity in terms of a number of rooms being used at the same time. I think the peak use of the hall is probably the most significant one. And I think that the changes through the insertion of the mezzanine do not necessarily change that peak capacity. For example, many of the successful events that happen in the Great Hall are not around seated use, but actually around standing use for, public festival, the beer festival, for example, where more than the number of seats may well be in attendance in the space and may be coming to the centre for that purpose. So whilst there is an increase in the number of seats for a theatrical performance by around 80 seats, that's not necessarily the peak load of that hall throughout the year in terms of all forms of use. There are not any additional car parking spaces being requested in this application or deemed perhaps necessary given the good provision of public parking. There is, however, a provision for sustainable bicycle choices, bicycle parking adjacent to the scheme that helps mitigate that increased load.
And we've got Councillor Steve Corney, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yep. Councillor Goldson sort of touched on my question. I'd like to dig a little bit deeper if I could, so try and get a better understanding of how the view from the window will will be obscured to the neighbouring property. I mean, before we even heard from the previous speaker, it's something I've got highlighted that we're introducing a window that we're then going to stop people from looking out of. It just sort of trying to understand that a little bit more if I could, please.
Okay. I mean, I think there's more, it might sound a bit of a silly answer. There's more than one use for a window. One is about letting light in. Another one is allowing ventilation. Another one is about views, and another one views in different directions. So I think one of the reasons, so what we've done in terms of us responding to the challenge around privacy is in our 3D model, we've built the assumed fixed screening that we're proposing, and we've tested that we cannot see into that window from different viewpoints around that piece of furniture that will be attached permanently to the window. So really if I use these pieces of paper as a useful tool, if I arrange these pieces of paper this way, I can see through. If I do an angle at a certain distance, there's no way that I can see through. And that is the strategy that's being employed. Another alternative that has been considered is the use of a film that permanently obscures and just lets light through. But I guess the position of the position in the proposal is that actually we do control the view and do allow that view down Priory Lane towards the Market Square as part of a kind of understanding of how the community centre and the Great Hall especially contribute to the civic life of the town centre.
Thank you. Just before we go on to more questions, I'm just going to bring one of our planning officers in.
We're just going to bring up the plans again. Okay, so we've got the proposed first floor plan here, kind of where I pointed out earlier, got the dormer window proposed here. So you can see the slatted kind of arrangement there. So that is what is proposed, the internal fixed screening to the window. And as you can see, we're requesting the finer details to be submitted by condition. So we can be satisfied that there are no views will be possible across Priory Lane to Priory House, bathroom, window and garden. But as you can see here, kind of the arrangement of those slats is that the views would be kind of diagonally along Priory Lane. And I think that's the intention of that screen. And just while I've got this plan up, I thought it's worth noting the windows on the south elevation that the objector mentioned. So these are the windows along here. Sorry, my mouse has stopped working, but moving. So those two windows on the south elevation, they're first floor level and they serve changing rooms. So officers would be recommending a further condition to make sure those are obscure glazed for the purpose of protecting the privacy of those using those rooms, as well as the neighbouring property to the south.
Question from Councillor John Nish?
Thank you, Chair. One of the issues that was brought up during the conversation by the officer was CV chimney. It's not a chimney, whatever it is, for the ground, for the air source heat pump, the fact that it's got to be extended. Could you tell me, did you look at other alternatives so you didn't have to have such a chimney? Not a chimney, an obelisk, whatever you want to call it.
I think you're referring to the air handling, the flue, which is that element, the rectangle there in the roof above the entrance. So, I mean, there's a big change that's happening in the way that this building is being used and how it works. And I suggested in the first in my 3 minutes that the air handling to the auditorium hasn't worked in this century. So whilst performances have been going on, they've been becoming increasingly uncomfortable. The doors have to be open. There's noise egress. So in the design of the project, we're improving the fabric, improving the insulation, improving the acoustic standard, and improving the air handling. So the whole of the loft of the building is full of new air handling plant that allows the theatre to perform better. And what that requires is somewhere the air coming in and the air going out. And obviously, with modern systems, that's going through a heat exchanger to get the benefit of any preheated air before it's lost for exhaust. So that flue replaces an existing flue that is boiler emissions and replaces it with an air in and out system. So it's being designed to meet the free area requirement. So there are actually two ducts going through that chimney that come up from the plant, and one goes that way and one goes that way. And the grills that are in them are the minimum amount of free area that's required to either intake or exhaust the air in terms of those systems. And they're working in combination with the two other louvers that are already in the two ends of the building, which we're also utilising. So the only reason it's there is that we need those flues, both intakes and exhausts, in the roof to allow the air handling to function. And we understand that we've designed it to be the minimum area that the engineer requires.
Thank you, Chair. It's not just for one use then. Thank you.
Councillor Doug Dew.
Good evening. Thank you for coming to speak. It's just a question again on those louvers. Are they fixed so they can't be actually altered? So if someone was to open the window and move them, could that happen? Or are they actually fixed and are the windows fixed, closed? So actually what we're being told is we've got that angle, so we won't be looking in, and it can't be altered by me popping in tonight and opening the window and doing it. Thank you.
So they're very different than Roman blinds or Venetian blinds. They're absolutely fixed. They're made of solid wood. The only way that they will be able to be adjusted is if the piece of furniture is broken to pieces and remade in some way. So it would be radical change. And then it would be in breach of the planning permission that's been granted.
Do we have any more questions? Yep. Councillor Jeff Clark.
Yes, thank you. If you can help me with 7.44. I note that part of the development is in flood zone 3B. Is that the new development or is that the existing part?
Sorry, can we just have the mic off for...
Sorry.
Okay, so the flood. So it's an interesting point. Largely, the building is a refurbishment-led project, so there's very little new development, and where there is new development, it's very largely on a reduced footprint of the previous town council extension. So my understanding from reading the flood risk assessment is that there is no meaningful difference between the existing condition and the proposed condition in terms of how it mitigates or leads to a flood risk, and that's been ascertained through the analysis of all the Environment Agency flood data.
Thank you. Can I add to that? That leads me to 746, because it says that there is going to be no capacity to make more flood risk. Well, if it's being built in the flood zone functional plane now, part of it, that reduces the amount of floodplain, functional floodplain. So can you clarify that that is not the case?
Sorry, could I just bring in our planning officer to answer that one, please? Thank you.
Yeah, so I'll just come in there and help out on that point. So part of the proposed extension, I believe, would be partly flood zone 2 and 3B, as you've said. So in accordance with the NPPF and guidance, minor developments, that's anything under 250 square meters in footprint, doesn't require the sequential or exceptions test. So that's why that's not been carried out. We did have a flood risk assessment submitted with this application, and what that has set out is that the 2-story extension actually has a reduced footprint when compared to the existing single story. We've had consultee comments back from the Environment Agency, and they've raised no objection, and they're happy with the flood risk assessment, but that's subject to conditions ensuring compliance. And the local lead flood authority are happy from a drainage perspective. So hopefully that's clarified at that point.
Any more questions for our speaker? No, we're going to move on to questions of clarification from our officers. Councillor Patricia Dorden.
Yeah, right. Thank you for the presentation. I just want you to go back to the slides to show us the picture of the dormant window when it's put in, so we can see it. And I'd also like to see, so that's the dormant window. I think it helps clarify some things, perhaps, along with what we've been told about the screening. And we'd also like to see the slide where it's looking, where you've got the extra extension above the council offices in regard to the monument, please. It just helps. Right. Okay, thank you for showing me those.
Any more questions for our officers? Councillor John Niche.
Thank you. Yeah, just a bit of clarification, because you noted in there that Heritage England didn't comment on the second on the revised plans, but because we don't know what the difference was between the original plans and the revised plans. So what were the differences that they may or may not have they didn't comment on, that they might have commented on had they so wished?
So Historic England, their initial comments, their concerns echoed the conservation officers in terms of the dormer window, the 2-story side extension, the scale and design. And there was also a point as to the original heritage assessment that was submitted with the application, heritage statement, sorry. So what we had in response to those comments, as well as the conservation officer, was a revised heritage statement. The 2-story extension, the proposed materials have changed. It's been reduced in height. The screen has been reduced. It's been brought in from the parapet. The dormer window has been reduced quite significantly in scale as well. So that everything that the amendments that have been made are in response to the conservation officer comments and Historic England, and they have been chased on a couple of occasions by myself for those additional comments, but they haven't been forthcoming.
Sorry, Councillor Tevlin.
Thank you. So how satisfied are officers with the applicant's response with regards to mitigating with those dormer windows? From your expertise, is the mitigation enough, or would you advise that actually that's not going to satisfy mitigating it? Yeah, basically. Thank you.
Thank you, and for you, Chair. So, in terms of windows, it's quite clear what the guidance is, that if the development can be made acceptable through conditions, then we should impose such conditions. In this case, the plans clearly show the kind of the screening, which directs the views down Priory Lane, but the officers have recommended conditions secure the final details of this. Part of that condition will also say it shall be retained as such thereafter. So to ensure that going forward, those screens remain. So in terms of reaching the officer recommendation with that condition, then yes, officers are happy that would address that. I think in terms of it's just also that additional condition in terms of obscure glazing for those windows on the south elevation for the changing rooms as well. So just note that as well.
Sorry, Councillor John Niche, did you have a previous question you wanted to ask?
It was I'm back on again. It was just handy while that picture's up there. Again, going back to clarification, you're saying that's not necessarily the colour of the brick, but the design is correct, but it's the colour and that's going to be agreed on at a later date.
Yeah, so I think it gives a good indication of the scale and how it will look in the context. But you're quite right. The red brick, we are looking for a red brick, but probably a slightly lighter shade for a more subtle contrast. It is quite important that there is a contrast there, but we've been conditioning that so we could see samples that the urban design officer and conservation officers could review on site, and to see that in the context of the existing brickwork. And I think I touched on it in the presentation. That isn't exactly accurate on terms of the colouring of the brickwork on the existing Priory Centre. So the contrast looks a bit more stark, but it is for illustrative purposes only.
Any more questions of clarification from our officers? No. So we're going to move on to our debate. Would anyone like to start our debate? Councillor Patricia Jordan.
I mean, this is a really difficult one because you can see it's a conservation area. As soon as I parked my car and I walked into it, you could see how much of it has been retained and the heritage there. And I have difficulty with the size of the extension because I also stood on that side of the meadows looking, which is why I asked you to put it up again, so for me to visualise it. But again, the Priory Centre is well known in St Neots. It's always been used, I believe, and I can see the need for the refurbishment. It's just, it's a shame conservation officer isn't here tonight, I think, actually, as well. We might have been able to ask her to clarify, and also for members of the public to hear clarification from her. Because it seems to me that we're going against one of your officers, which is showing objections. I know I'm probably stating the obvious, but I'll be happy to hear what other people have to say, because the loss of heritage for me is a big one. You know, there's a lot of, in our town centres where we were encouraged to build up, we lost a lot then, and then we don't use our town centres anymore. So it's difficult. I'll be happy to hear what other people say.
Thank you. I'm just going to bring in our planning officer.
Thank you, Chair, and for you. So just to be clear, so yes, there is an objection from the Conservation Officer and Historic England noting that's on the earlier scheme. I think it's officers aren't in a disagreement with the Conservation Officer. There is harm, But as the report sets out, and all developments are entirely about harm or benefit, I think it's just being clear in reading the report and going through those paragraphs. So the NPPF clearly sets out that if there's clear and convincing justification, and also if there's less than substantial harm, a balancing exercise should be carried out. So planning officers have done that in the report. So just advise members to read that report again, just to be clear. It's a situation where, yes, there is harm, but as the plan and balance sets out, in officers' view, the benefits outweigh the harm. But that is following the NPPF. It's clear the paragraphs follow that in some situations there is harm, but there's a number of exercises that need to be carried out. So I think just be mindful of when you read the report as a whole, especially the conclusion.
Councillor Steve Corney.
Chair, every one of us will have a different opinion, won't they? I mean, that's the nature of it, isn't it? And personally, I look at it and I actually think that the extensions actually looks more sympathetic to the area than what there is there currently. That's just my own opinion when I look at it. I think it's whilst it's going to hide a certain element, a certain view, I still think what's going to be there will actually looks better than what's the single story extension at the moment. Do have my concerns about the visibility. I think we've probably done it to death a little bit, but we put our trust into you guys with the conditions. I think that's really important. And whilst you have to be satisfied, but so does our first speaker, as a neighbouring property. I think it's really important that and hopefully, if this does go forward, obviously you'll work well with them, and they need to feel satisfied as much as probably more so than you guys really as our planning officers. I'm not, I'm minded to approve, but I'm not going to, I think it's too early in the debate to sort of to push that, but that's where I'm edging at the moment. I'll leave it there at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor John Leash.
Thank you, Chair. I did feel quite uncomfortable with this one to start with. I've got slightly less uncomfortable with it as we've gone along. Specifically with Mr. Bridges' comments to start with, I think we seem to have a solution on that one set out by condition. And I suppose it is difficult for people who don't understand conditions have to be adhered to and they have to be done and satisfactory. And sometimes it's difficult even for us as a committee to think, well, we've got so many conditions, why didn't they put it in the first place? But that's because it's the nature of the beast, isn't it? And I think if you mentioned as well, I put down here ages ago, this is all about balance and the balance of the harm, which, there is going to be harm there. And you're quite right, it's set out in the report that there's a number of areas of harm there. It's down to the balance of the usability of this building. And it's the hope that, this building can continue to be used and used more effectively, I suppose. Although from a planning perspective, we look at it from more so from the planning side of it. I'm in almost agreement. I will listen to the rest of other people's debates, but looking through it, some of those concerns can be dealt with conditions, as we've spoken about. Also, obscuration of glass for the other property if it is overlooking. Again, I haven't looked directly on here as to how that is, but when you showed it on the map, when your mouse wasn't working because the cat frightened it away, I think it was there that if it was obscured glass. And I can also understand why the other one can't be obscured glass, because they're using it for a dual purpose. There is a visibility look down the road, because obviously that is the other issue, is whether that dorm one could have been obscured glass, but that might affect other things. But so on the whole, I'm balancing more towards the acceptability of it now with the harm on the balance. And again, I'm happy to listen to the rest of comments that go around the room.
Thank you. Councillor Eric Butler.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it is a difficult one, this one. I'm trying to filter through the conservation team where it is less than substantial harm, but there is a harm there. And as Councillor Corney said, that the original building, that is a very stark wall. There's no great architectural merit in that, looking at that big slab. And I find some of the newer developments there actually adds a bit of character to it. So it softens it. Now I appreciate the overlooking, but that's been pretty much answered. So we're in the balance again, aren't we? Do the benefits outweigh the harm? And this, I don't know the building greatly, but it sounds as though it's not of great use at the moment, considering the air that's needed and the light that's needed in there. So I'm like one or two more. I'm balancing to go with approval because I think it will be a benefit. The only thing I don't like is the removal of the existing offices, but you know, we've got to move with times. They need more room, and it will make the whole building a lot more usable and user friendly. So I think I'm in a mood, Chairman, to propose that we accept the officer's recommendation of approval.
Thank you. Do I have any more comments? Councillor Kevin Gorson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, again, looking at this one, this picture, it shows you what I think the harm is, that the view from this side is what is going to be the harm. But the kiln is still there when you go inside and see all the other. And the benefits are it's a community building that will be used by the greater community for a lot more things. So we're all talking about balances, checks and balances, how it works for the community. And whilst I still don't quite like what is just a start block, it could be a Lego block to my mind. When you see that, it just doesn't seem to fit in with it. But I think the payoff is with the community getting benefit from a building that is built more ecologically built for the future. The only concern I still have is if you're looking for additional usage, mass and beer festivals and so on, a bike rack isn't acceptable. And even the police have said that they have concerns about parking. But I'm still leaning towards accepting the proposal because it's the community that will keep this one going. And so hopefully the community will carry on and use it.
Is there anyone else that wants to contribute? Yes, Councillor John Nish.
I was just checking you didn't want to ask something different. I'm happy listening in through here that's going on the balances and listening to Councillor Butler's proposal as well. I'm happy to second the proposal with the conditions imposed that we've talked about. So there you go. I'm so happy to second.
Yeah, so I'm going to take Councillor Butler's proposal and Councillor John Nish as a seconder, and moving on to a vote. Those in favour?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Those against? And those abstaining?
So 1 against.
1 against?
Abstain. 1 abstain. 1 against, 1 abstain.
So that's approved. Yeah, we're just going to have a quick 5-minute adjournment.
Item 3C, which is an application in Somersham, the erection of a replacement garage in Somersham. So our planning officer, Robin Kerrigan, will be presenting that to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. This application has been referred to Development Management Committee in accordance with the scheme and delegation, as the application has been submitted by the partner of a member of the council staff who's involved in the planning or development process. So the application is hatched in the black there in Somersham. It's a 2-storey semi-detached dwelling. There's an aerial view just so you can kind of see and another location plan. The proposal's to replace an existing lean-to timber garage with a brick-built garage on the same footprint but with a monopitched roof. So the site, the height, sorry, would be slightly higher at approximately 3.6 meters to accommodate the monopitched roof design. So this is the existing floor plan, proposed floor plan, sorry. It just reflects that of what was existing. So the garage would be here, which is on the exact same footprint as the previous garage. So while it's acknowledged the internal dimensions of the garage would be too small to accommodate a vehicle, there's ample off-road parking, there's hard surfacing at the front of the site, which you can see in these pictures here. The site is not in a conservation area, there's no heritage assets in the vicinity, and it is within flood zone 1. So our officer recommendation is for approval. As having regard to all relevant material considerations, it's concluded that the replacement garage accords with policies in the local plan and the MPPF. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We do not have any speakers for this particular application. Therefore, we will go straight to questions of clarification for our planning officer. So are there any questions of clarification for our planning officer? There are no questions, so we will move straight on to the discussion. Is there anyone that would like to start the discussion? Councillor Niche.
Just so we can delay this a bit longer, having looked through it and actually know the locality as well, I have no problem whatsoever with this one. And of course, we do know it's only here for the right reasons, to ensure that it's above board from someone internally. Having looked at it, and I'm happy to recommend approval on this one and propose that we accept it on that account. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Corney.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Leash beat me to it again. Obviously, for due diligence, it's perfectly sensible that it's come here and we followed the right path. So I'm more than happy to second it, because we wouldn't see it other than it being a member of staff's partner.
Councillor Sanderson.
I'm just going to say Councillor Corney beat me to it because I was going to second, but I'm happy to support this application.
Fabulous. Okay, so we will move on to our vote. All those that are for approval. So please raise your hand.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14.
Any abstentions? Any against? So that has been approved. Thank you very much. We will move on to item 3D on our agenda, which is a planning application in Facet, and that will be presented to us by our planning officer, Charlotte Dew.
Chairman, before you go on, I just I know I declared an interest, but I do actually farm the field on the northern edge of that, just to make that clear. But that has it makes no difference to me.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention. Thank you. Thank you. Bringing our planning officer, Charlotte Dew.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening. This application has been brought before Development Management Committee as the Planning Officer's recommendation of approval is contrary to the Parish Council's recommendation of refusal. This is an application to demolish the semi-detached dwelling, retail unit and equine facilities at 93 Peterborough Road, Farset. The application seeks to erect 3 two-storey apartment buildings to provide assisted living accommodation for adults aged 18 to 65 with learning, mental and physical difficulties, use class C3. Care would be provided on a domestic basis within the occupant's own residence. The site shown on this map is hatched black. In terms of constraints, there are no designated heritage or ecological assets within or in proximity to the site. The site lies within flood zone 1 and therefore at lowest risk of flooding. Outline permission for the demolition of the host dwelling, retail shop and equine facilities and the erection of 6 dwellings on the site was approved in 2020. A late representation from Cambridge Fire Service seeks a scheme for the provision and location of fire hydrants. This is recommended to be imposed by a condition if members are minded to grant consent. This is an aerial view of the site. The site is outlined in yellow. Parish have raised concerns regarding the limited services and facilities in the locality. However, as per the principles of sustainable development, a small settlement such as Farset, which offers a range of services such as a shop, village hall, public house and primary school offers far greater opportunities for development. The parish also raised concerns regarding the irregularity of bus services in the locality. However, the application site is located within walking distance from the nearest bus stop and services are provided within 30 minutes Monday to Saturday and every hour on Sundays and public holidays. Officers therefore consider the application site to be a sustainable location for this scale of development. Officers have carried out extensive public consultation on the application and have sought the views from the Urban Design Officer, Lead Local Flood Authority, Environmental Health, Highways and Affordable Housing Officers. None of the consultees have objected to the proposal. On this site, you can see a block plan of the proposed apartment blocks. The 3 apartment blocks would be screened by the retained hedgerow to the north and the proposed hedgerow to the west. This natural screening would reduce the visual impact of the proposed development from the surrounding countryside. The applicants seek to infill gaps within the southern hedgerow boundary, just along here. Officers acknowledge third-party representations raised in regard to the maintenance of the shared boundary hedgerow, particularly for residents backing onto the site at Throstle Nest, just over here, and number 89 Peterborough Road, whose garden backs on just over here. A condition seeking landscape maintenance details, including the long-term design objectives, maintenance responsibilities, and maintenance schedules for all landscaped areas is recommended to be imposed. On this slide, you can see floor plans of the proposed apartment blocks. On this slide, you can see the elevational plans for the proposed apartment blocks. In regard to affordable housing, the development would drive a provision of 5 affordable dwellings in order to be policy compliant. In this instance, the developer submitted a viability appraisal with the associated calculations to claim the development would be unviable should 5 affordable dwellings be provided on site. In this instance, the assessment, an independent assessment was undertaken, which also agreed with the findings of the report. This is a view from Peterborough Road facing the proposed access and number 93. Highways officer acknowledges the proposal may result in the intensification of the access due to the movements associated with 5 to 6 daily carers. On balance, the officer is satisfied the trip generation would be similar to the previously permitted 6 dwellings. The concerns raised by objectors in terms of traffic congestion on Peterborough Road are acknowledged. However, this is an existing situation over which the application has no control. The application site can be accessed via sustainable methods of transport, given its proximity to a bus stop. It is also not considered that future residents would significantly add to the pressure of traffic congestion in the vicinity of the site. This is a photo from within the site looking towards number 93. This is a photo from within the site looking towards the retail unit and equestrian facilities. Officers have considered overlooking concerns raised by the residents of number 89, Peterborough Road, as their rear amenity space is adjacent to the application site. It's shown on the right of this photo, just over here. Blocks A and B would be separated from the common boundary by 13 metres. Given the residential setting, oblique overviews into the rear amenity space of number 89 already occurs from surrounding properties. Whilst it is considered blocks A and B would increase the existing overlooking of this neighbour's garden, the separation distance between the properties and the proposed boundary treatments would ensure no unacceptable overlooking would occur in this residential setting. This is a view from within the site looking towards the retail unit and equestrian facilities. The hedgerow to the north will be retained. That's on the left of this photo. And this is a view from within the site looking towards the west, where a proposed hedgerow will be planted. The proposed development would contribute to the district's housing supply as a windfall site and address an identified need for specialist housing. The proposal is acceptable in regard to surface water drainage, highway safety, residential amenity, design, trees and biodiversity. The delivery of policy-compliant affordable housing has been proven to be unviable with this development. On balance, the benefits of the delivery of this specialist housing to meet an identified need within the district and the county would outweigh the harm resulting from a lack of affordable housing in this instance. Therefore, the officer's recommendation is for delegated powers to approve subject to the conditions outlined in the report and the completion of a section 106. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Looking at my list, we again do not have any speakers for this particular application. So I'd just like to note that it's a shame that there isn't a representation from the parish. We will move on to questions of clarification to our planning officer. Are there any questions of clarification for our planning officer? Councillor Nish.
I won't go for my disappointment just yet because I'll leave that because it's not the disappointment about the clarification. I got it when I went up there. I was not difficult. I was slightly confused as the access. Is that a semi-detached building that they're taking half down? Okay, obviously. Do we know the width, that access point? Because I flicked through and couldn't see it. I'm just thinking about access because I see highways have no objections apart from to ensure that we have the audit carried out following, isn't it, from consultate with conditions, but it's the access width. I mean, if it helped, the reason I ask is probably a building control matter, actually, but it's a width for access for emergency services. I know they've asked about hydrants, but it depends on the width.
I can come back on that point, and I'm busy trying to search the report, but I remember seeing somewhere that it's going to be a 5 metre vehicle access width, and then there's a footpath adjacent to it. I think that's 1.2, the footpath. So it's definitely wide enough for two-way traffic.
Councillor Goulson.
Thank you, Chair. In the consultations, it's one of these that I've seen so many people, no no objections and so on, but conditions. What are the conditions shown for the highways? Because it says in the interest of highway safety, but I'm just trying to get confirmed what the highway safety they're recommending.
If I can come back on that point. So you're saying that the conditions say subject to, or the reason for the conditions is highway safety?
In 5.2, it's Cambridge County Council Highway Authority, no objections subject to the imposition of conditions in the interest of highway safety. I know you've got visibility display, but I was just wondering what else were there other conditions?
Yeah, we can come back on that. So the Highways Authority normally come back and say that they want conditions, and the reason they are wanting them is usually to protect highway safety. So on this one, I think they've asked for a construction management plan. They've also asked for removal of permitted development rights for gates over the access to be laid out and constructed in accordance with the access specification from Cambridge County Council. They want the parking and services laid out prior to the occupation. They want the public highways to remain clear during construction. Like you say, they mentioned visibility displays. They want details of access drainage and all those combined to ensure that there's sufficient highway safety. Thank you.
Councillor Pitt.
Thank you, Chair. I suspect this may not be a planning matter, but I'm just intrigued to understand the demolition of half of a semi-detached property. Are there any planning implications in terms of the remaining wall and making good? And so a vague question around that topic, if you can guide us on any material planning aspects to that area. Thank you.
There's a condition recommended in your pack that details of how that elevation is going to be made good should be submitted and agreed. It all comes down to the Party Wall Act and building regulations, which is separate to planning process.
Thank you. Councillor Slade.
Yeah, my question relates to that. So the owners next door at 95. So it says that there's no letters of support received from households during the course of the application, but also in the representations, there's nothing from those neighbours. It just seems a bit strange that the neighbours haven't responded.
No, there was no comments received from that adjoining neighbour. I would point out the planning history. There was a previous application for 6 houses that was approved, and that involved the demolition of that house as well. So I assume that the owners and the occupiers have been aware that this is probably the intention on this site for some time.
Are there any other questions of clarification for our planners? There are no other questions of clarification, so we will move on to the discussion. Is there anyone that would like to just start the discussion for me? Councillor Corney, thank you very much.
Somebody's got to do it. Don't particularly have an issue with this one, to be fair. I'm going to beat Councillor Niche. Actually, it's a shame that the parish council are not here to sort of maybe give us more of an idea of their feeling. But I think the officers have got this one right. I've not got much more to sort of say really. And I agree. I'll be happy to propose it.
Thank you. Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. Yes, if the parish council had enlightening things to say beyond what we've elicited from their submission, then we'll be forever going to have to manage without that, because I agree with Councillor Corney. On the face of what's in here, this looks an extremely hard application to disagree with. Parish council, whose objection is the only reason we are discussing it here, leads in terms of the summary we've got on highway safety, which we've just discussed, and I don't think I see any highways based reason for refusing this, and then the points around the sustainability of the local area and officers touched on that extremely helpfully in the report, which is covered in the document. So very happy to second.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wakeford. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I'm not surprised the parish council are not here tonight because I sat in on the meeting when they discussed it, and there was quite a discussion on road safety and whatnot, and that was the main reason they refused it. But after they'd refused it, the chairman did take over and say, well, we did a survey on the village some years previous, and it was noted in that survey that this sort of accommodation, if you like, assisted living, special needs, was requested by the parishioners. So that's the reason I think he's just sat back and thought, well, you know, do what you will with it. It is needed. There was an application in for a similar sort of thing down in the Fen about probably best part of a year ago. And that was turned down because there was no footpath, single track road and various things like that. So that was refused. So, you know, the area is thinking down those lines. We've got a safe house, if you like, that causes a little bit of trouble. I think that's what puts a few people off of agreeing with something like this, because they don't want it to turn into, you know, a police tearing around there every day. So I will say I'm in favour of it. I mean, it's on the face of it, it looks so it will be run well, monitored well. The existing site, as it were, I mean, I've been around there years ago because it used to be a tack shop and horse feed and everything. So there's always been quite a few vehicles in and out of that driveway, although it's very narrow. I'm like the rest. I mean, it must stack up financially to knock an house down to put this in place, obviously, else they wouldn't be doing it. Not one of my favourite things, you know, and it does affect the amenity value of the properties either side. But I've looked down the list, and as you all have, you know, there's basically no objections from anyone. There hasn't been a great input from the local community, so I will be voting for it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Niche, did you want to? Okay. So, Councillor Gorton.
Thank you, Chair. No, thank you. My initial look at this, when I first get these, I have a look at what the officer quickly says, and then have a look at the plans. And my initial one was it was going to be for the neighbouring properties, a lot of traffic movements in and out. But then you go through and see the planning history, they've already got permitted for six houses to be built there. So as it said, that's already taken out of the equation. That there isn't any other representation too much in the way of objection from neighbours, etc. It's as if it's accepted by them. And as colleagues have said, it is something that is needed, and I just hope it is run very well, in which case I will propose acceptance.
Thank you. So we have approval, a proposal of approval from Councillor Corney, and we have that seconded by Councillor Wakeford. Therefore, we'll put that to the vote. All those who are in favour of approval, can you please raise your hand? Any against and any abstentions? Therefore, that has been carried and that has been approved. We will move on to item 4 on our agenda. And our planning officer, Amanda McSherry, will report to us our appeal decisions. Councillor Gorson, could you turn off your microphone?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, you've got at the end of the pack the appeal decisions. There was 3 that were allowed. The first one was the Spaldwick case, and that actually came before members in June this year. There was a second application that came in and the committee approved it. So the inspector was in line with that decision. The second one in Ellington, additional information was submitted during the appeal that wasn't with us at the time of determination, which addressed the reasons for refusal. And the fourth one down at Offord Clooney, this was allowed, and it was just a difference of opinion between officers and the inspector. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to say thank you to everybody that contributed to our discussion this evening and for the hard work that the planning officers have put into writing the reports and presenting to us this evening. With that, we will end our meeting.